Hello, Weston patrons. This is Doc Crane, the host of the Film Club, and as we continue keeping our social distance, today's theme is about something we can't do: travel. Rather than go to Tuscany with Diane Lane or Scotland with Burt Lancaster as we did in past Film Club screenings, it seemed appropriate to offer some breathtaking locales and methods of transportation that we might have some second thoughts about. Available on Weston's Hoopla streaming link are 3 very different films. 2 are documentaries, and the third is a dramatic feature. The first is Across the Ice by the activist photographer Sebastian Copeland, and it documents his 2010 trek across the Greenland ice sheet. Copeland's aim was to call attention to the effects of global warming, and starting from a fjord at the southern tip of the country, he and his partner ascended a glacier tongue, weaving their way around meltwater lakes and treading lightly over crevasses on their way up to the ice sheet. Their 43-day journey would span 2,300 kilometers, with their main method of transportation being kite skiing, when they weren't being buffeted by hurricane-force winds and hunkered down in their tent. But the hours spent pulled by the wind are amazing, and covering huge distances, it becomes a question of whether they will be able to break the standing record of 507 kilometers traveled in one day. Pushing towards the northern horizon, they come across relics consigned to the ice, such as abandoned radar stations, as well as the telltale traces of a changing environment. And as much as this is Copeland's narrative, the presence of his partner, polar trekker Eric McNair Landry, becomes more and more evident. Low-key, self-effacing, and extremely capable, McNair Landry is someone you clearly want along with you on any trip. And in the interest of full disclosure, I once met Eric in 2011 when I was doing research on Greenland and he was gearing up for a trip across Antarctica. Going into the meeting, I fully expected encountering somebody with a suffer-no-fools attitude, and it was anything but that. Eric was incredibly good-natured and low-key, and so thin and wiry, although when we did sit down to breakfast and I said, "I'll treat," he said, "Oh, that's great. By the way, I'm on an 8,500 calorie a day diet." And I said, "So how many breakfasts am I buying you?" And he said, "That's about 3. And he ate it all. The second film is Horatio's Drive by Ken Burns. And if the previous film went to Greenland, this documentary travels to 1903 America, another foreign country. This is the story of Horatio Nelson Jackson, a well-to-do doctor who, on a bet of $50, set out to drive an automobile from San Francisco to New York and be the first person to drive across the continent. To accomplish this, he bought a car, hired a mechanically inclined driver, and set off for the east. At this time, the only paved roads were in just a few cities, and what counted for highways were essentially paths that often vanished into the mountains, deserts, rivers, and especially mud. With his words spoken by Tom Hanks, Dr. Jackson comes across as the ever-optimistic soul in pursuit of the vigorous life. For his fragile first-generation automobile breaks down repeatedly, he gets frequently lost in territories where the residents had never even seen a car, and he ends up spending thousands to win a $50 bet. Through it all, the man refuses to give up hope, and the further east he travels, the more of a celebrity he becomes. This fact may have insulated him in his travels across country that may not have been the Wild West of yore, but America in 1903 was a profoundly violent place. Burns does not really elaborate too much on this point, as this is a genial film. His emphasis is on the coming of the automobile, and how Dr. Jackson's tenuous journey is the opening act of a new era that would, for better and worse, transform America and the world. But in 1903, that didn't seem like a sure thing, as during that journey, Dr. Jackson was only able to keep his car running with the help of local blacksmiths, a people whose livelihoods would be swept away by the car. And this is just one of the many little ironies the film explores. For a film that delves deeply into the heart and soul of wanderlust, we have our third suggestion from 2014, Tracks. The film is by John Curran, the director of The King's Speech, and stars Mia Wasikowska as Robin Davidson, who in 1977 set off on a trek across Western Australia using camels. At the core of this film are the restless instincts of Robin Davidson, whose ambivalence towards urban society and exasperation with the bully boy ethic of the outback instilled in her a deep, abiding desire to leave the company of people altogether. Having very few trusted friends, but one beloved dog, Robin learned to train the wild camels that populate the Australian interior with an idea to take them 1,700 miles across the desert to the Indian Ocean, a venture no one believed she could accomplish or even survive. But Robin was fixed on going off into the outback, and the only way she could afford to do it was by approaching National Geographic magazine to finance her. For her it was a devil's bargain, as it required her to work with the photographer Rick Smolin, played in the film by Adam Driver. Although Smolin only met up with her at intervals to document the journey, and he tried to be a genial collaborator, his photographer's ethos aggravated situations and put Robin at risk as much as he helped. Along the way, she encountered a scattering of souls, some very decent, some not, while others were just silly nuisances. In effect, her camels and intensely loyal dog become characters as vibrant as many of the people, and the inevitable loss of some of them make for very hard scenes. Here the film does not gloss over how grueling her 6-month crossing was, as the long stretches of isolation brought out the demons right alongside any moments of transcendence. This is without a doubt one of the more intense films I've recommended, but the sense of arrival with Mia Wasikowska's performance and the film's sublime grittiness make it absolutely worthwhile. So there are my 3 films. From a parental concerns standpoint, Across the Ice would appear to be unrated with no issues other than 2 people getting really cold. Horatio's Drive is rated G, so nothing more to add there. And Tracks is rated PG-13, which is a little surprising, given there's some profanity including Australian F-bombs, but only faint traces of nudity, and violence in the film is suffered by the animals, which in the context of this film is pretty tough. Another factor of these films is frankly the strenuousness of the journeys. But the beauty of recommending them is that you won't want to slog out into the outback any more than do slip and slide across sub-zero Greenland, and that the places we're settled into right now aren't so bad. Now if you want to see trailers, Across the Ice and Tracks have them posted on the IMDb, while with Horatio's Drive you can find clips of it on YouTube. This is Doc Crane, and thanks again.